Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Capital Finders Podcast with Mike and James. James is phoning in today from New Zealand as usual, and today our special guest is Maz from Denmark. So, between the three of us, we've covered all the way around the globe. And Maz has a really fascinating story. As you know, we always try to bring you people that have done something really different to what they're doing now and talk about their journey. And Maz, you're a really young guy for what you're doing these days. Um, I've been working with Linda Tilson, who's many of our listeners know is a pretty well-known coach. She's runs the Two Perspectives podcast, which you are the co-host on. You've also
Thank you very much.
You've also recently got involved in sailing, which I guess that's a pretty good thing for a Dane to do. But before that, you went through some other stuff. You told us you struggled with addiction. You worked at a shoe store, which was a job that
I've done a whole lot.
You obviously didn't
like
love
to try
that
stuff.
much. So anyway, tell us about your journey. What's it like being on this big internationally known podcast?
Well, it's absolutely amazing that you want to have me here, having the invite. And I think the best way to really tell my journey is to tell it in two parts, the professional part and the personal part, because I think for me, the journey has been split up. So, well, let's get the big elephant out of the room with addiction. I look back at my addiction personally as not a good thing, but it really helped me grow in a lot of ways. Because I ended up I wasn't a very introverted person. And when you go out and have to buy drugs, you meet intimidating people. And that really made me have to overcome that person, like that very introverted person within myself. So I don't look back at my addiction as a negative thing. I look back at it just as a lesson, nothing else than that, and a very good lesson.
Okay, so how did you? I guess your first real kind of job out of high school was a shoe store. What prompted you to leave the shoe business?
Well, I I didn't really want to get into shoes, but I also like to just say yes to a lot of things. I thought, fuck it, let me try it. And I really found my passion for shoes. I love shoes. I love Nikes. I probably have a little too many pairs. There's like boxes all over the place. I don't even know what's in each box. It's getting to that point. So by just having that open mentality, you find stuff that you like. Because for me, I've had jobs, like every job I've had, I've found like new stuff that I like, learned about myself, what am I good at, what I'm not so good at. So what prompted me to leave the shoe business is the current place I was working at, I didn't see a path to where I wanted to go in the shoe industry. I would love to be like, let's say, the head salesperson of Nike here in Scandinavia. I would love to do that. But from where I was at, that was just not possible in a direct line. I had to switch paths to, instead of going down, let's use an example, the 50 kph lane on the motorway, you take the one that goes 100, but you have to go a little bit around, but it's still faster. So I really just needed more challenges in my life. And I just think I had to leave the shoe store alone as well, because that was, in a way, maybe brought me back to my addiction, because when I was working there was when my addiction was the worst. So having to just switch my environment up completely.
So how would you advise people today that maybe are in a job that they're not? It's kind of sort of the direction they want to go, but it's not going to get them where they want to be. So what are some things that helped you get where you are now?
Well, what do you mean by that is, like, let's say you are in a field that you like, but like me, because of the company you worked at, there was like limitations. Is that correct?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I think you need to ask yourself a very important question first. How many responsibilities do I have? Because if you're like Mike or James, then you shouldn't quit your job straight away because you have so many responsibilities. But if you're in a situation like mine, living at home, I think you should just quit your job before finding something new, because that's when is going to push you to find something new. And going into interview and them saying like, okay, so you weren't afraid to just quit the job. No, I believe no, because I believe in my own ability to get a new one because of my skills that I've learned. So I don't think that's a negative thing. But let's say you are in a position where you have plenty of responsibilities, a house, kids, stuff like that. I think what's very important is finding a person like I have found with Linda, that is kind of, I'm able to help her. I'm all about just working for free. To all the people that are listening to Gary Vee, he preaches this a lot. But working for free with a person like Linda is amazing for me because I learned so much from doing it. And helping her with the stuff that she's not so knowledgeable about. It's really just helped me to grow my level of skill. So I'm able to switch lanes and slowly do it, because if I'm able to give her value, help her build an amazing coaching brand, we're going to be doing something with that later this year. So people should definitely look forward to that. But helping her build something successful, I know if I do that for free, I don't expect anything to any monetary gain. But if we keep working together, there's definitely a high chance it would happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, and I know James would agree with this. I think we've all done some work pro bono, as they say, because we just believe in what's going on. We believe in the person we're working with, and building those kinds of friendships is actually, to me, worth a lot more than any salary we might have gotten out of it, and it does lead to greater success. I know James used to be a professional blues musician. He's told us many stories about various bands getting together and playing for 10 cents an hour basically, but then eventually the gold records started to come. So what questions do you have for him, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to ask a completely different one. So I don't know whether you want to continue along this vein.
No. I like to say yes to a lot of things, open-minded. So go ahead.
It was more like it was more to do with the Danish rather than you per se, but I guess as we're talking about, what could American startups learn from the Danish approach to a business?
From the Danish approach to a business. Well, I think one thing that American startups could learn from the Danish approach to business is, because Denmark is a very small country, everything is kind of local. A 2-hour drive for me is far away. 5 hours is across the country. So things are not that far away. So I think a lot of successful Danish startups really are good at building a community and serving the community, instead of focusing on a bunch of different things at the same time. Because some of the most successful small businesses I see over here in Denmark that definitely have the potential to grow is the ones where they're all about serving the community and just being very kind. Well, I guess from my perspective, at least in the US, it's more about, we want to do just have 10 million in sales within 5 years. No, I think it's about building that community in a way, that fan base around your business.
I think that's a great point, because Mike, I don't hear that in many startup conversations at the very early stage, right? It often comes to, hey, we have to make some sales, and then we need to go after a second round of funding and whatnot. Whereas often the community seems to come a little bit later. Whereas what I'm hearing from us is that kind of the community is considered and started to be nurtured in the very early stages.
Yeah, it is somewhat unusual with as the number of startups that we help to get funding, and that's something we always cover. Need to show your investors who already wants your product. That is what Maz is saying. Who's the community out there? Who are the people that are already interested and want to do what you're doing? And it is
Build
very
a
rare.
strong foundation in a way, where is what how I would describe it.
Yeah, so it is still too rare here in the States for particularly company founders, particularly in tech. They'll come in and pitch and try to get investment in their business, but they really haven't built any kind of beginning market, so to speak. Right? It's like they don't really know who's out there. They don't really know who wants what they're selling. They're just so invested in this cool idea, which they have. So, but I think one of the things, because Denmark is a socialist economy and the United States is really a very mixed between capitalism and socialism, depending which state you're doing business in. There's a big difference in thought of penetrating an existing market versus creating a community and creating a market from scratch. Two totally different things. But that is a really good point. So yeah, I think more American founders would benefit from doing what Moss is talking about, building the community first as they develop the product or the service that they're going to sell.
Because I mean,
think it comes with like the socialist thing in a way, because the way I see socialism here in Denmark is not that it's not capitalist. We still have like big companies. Maersk, one of the biggest transportation companies in Denmark, a huge medicine company. There are big companies, that just not as many of them. But with the whole socialist thing, it's about taking care of the people around you and making sure that everybody has possibilities. And I think that is also trickled down into the business and how you do business over here.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different socialism than the kind we saw, for example, in Russia in the 1930s.
That's communism. That's
right.
Not socialism. Very different.
Yeah, but people, I think, get those mixed up sometimes.
For sure. And there's like, there could probably also be bad socialism. I just think,
oh yeah,
from my Danish perspective, so far what I've seen is socialism is the best like system to run a country, because it's a good mix between communism. I would much rather have capitalism than communism. It just doesn't work. We've seen it plenty of times. But I think also when I look at the US, there's like big problems in hugely capitalist countries if things doesn't go very well. Because over here, there's a lot of ways that you're able to get support for things that you need. Like school, for example, is paid for. You even get paid to go to school, stuff like that from the socialists. I think every country should have that. Of course, there's some things that I don't necessarily agree with how it works. But I think minor tweaks and would basically be as close to perfect as you can get.
Okay, so along those lines as well, there's a question submitted from some of our listeners want to know what's basically the difference between Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, because sadly, many people over here are thinking that it's all kind of one thing. But of course, we know, you and I know, they're very different countries and different cultures. But kind of lay it out for us.
For sure. I wanted to start off with Finns because they're my favorite Scandinavians. Finns they're very crazy and they're very good racing drivers. I love Formula One, stuff like that, because they're used to driving on icy roads 80% of the time. So they have something called the sisu, which is basically the closest thing you can say is to courage. And that makes them very good in Formula One, which is one of the reasons why I like them. And apparently they can drink a lot of vodka, I've heard. And they beat the Russians. That's another good thing. So let's say Sweden, well, they're really, I don't see the point of Sweden.
You don't see the point of Sweden.
They have a bunch of trees, they have like some okay cities. Their women are beautiful, of course. You can go skiing there as well, but us Danes and Swedes, well, we don't it's kind of like a bad brother, two brothers having a bit of a bad relationship, still love each other. The Norwegians, they're cool. They're both like big into green energy, stuff like that. Denmark and Norway was actually the same country for a very, very long time. And yeah, so I like the Norwegians. The Swedes not so much, and the Finnish they're cool. And I think Denmark is just well, a lot of Danish culture converts about two things. A word we call hygge, which is basically like chilling, would be the closest thing to it. And at every opportunity to celebrate something, Danes get drunk because, we just like to drink a lot over here in Denmark.
Oh
I
my
guess that's
gosh.
why I like the Finnish, because they also like to drink.
Does this help with the podcast? Do you and Linda celebrate after the podcast with vodka, or how do you?
Ooh, I don't really like vodka actually. If I need to drink something, it needs to be like a dark spirit. Dark spirits. I love my dark spirits.
So
Hey, I have got another totally different random question, Mike.
yeah, just ask.
So this is about identity, right? Country identity, and
Sure.
and I wonder whether it's going to be a contentious issue because the whole Brexit thing, right? Because Brexit was almost seen as, now I didn't really follow it much, right? But it was when the UK wanted to leave the EU for a multitude of reasons, and the country was kind of split down the two, and it really broke families up, it broke friends up. It was the first time, and I guess there were probably political. From what I can see, there's political animosity in the States between different presidential supporters, and I think Brexit probably came to a sort of a similar thing, right? And it was interesting, really, because obviously the EU, I guess, it is more of a collection of states, right? It was seen as that, kind of like the United States of America, whereas Britain has how can I put this without sounding racist or countryist, has sort of reclaimed its sort of individuality to a degree, right? Well,
they're not part of the mainland. I think that's what it's about.
And then what's interesting is that living in New Zealand, we're 3 or 4 generations away from the pioneers coming over here in the 1860s and the 1870s. And even in the early 1900s, life was sort of incredibly hard. And that's where the archetypal kind of Kiwi man, and it's similar to the Aussies as well, the archetypal man who can sort of fix anything and do anything and build a house and fix a car and shear a sheep and build a house and do whatever else, right? So it's that that sense, particularly in the rural areas and the small town, is still very alive, very, very dependable, kind of rugged, kind of tough, right? And that sense is, I guess, comes through in how we as a country see ourselves. We kind of see ourselves, although we're sort of stuck on the edge of the world, miles away. I think Australia's like 1,000 miles away, although the phrase is they're just across the ditch. But we have this sense of independence, right? And agricultural subsidies were pulled away from the farmers almost overnight in the 1980s. Very, very, very tough times, but they've come back, and now there's no subsidies. Or so I guess Denmark, although it isn't an island, obviously, it's still like a small country compared with the States or China or whatnot.
Just look south, like Germany, like 100 million people. Up here it's like 5 or 6.
Yeah, and so I know that New Zealand businesses, although maybe the modern businessman maybe isn't that kind of I mean, some are. Don't get me wrong. I've met businessmen who have come from a farm and can still fix cars with a piece of wire and build a house and everything else. But that mentality comes through to starting businesses and running businesses right. They are problem solvers. They are quite courageous. They are, individuals, and they aren't afraid to move forward. Do you feel that sense of Denmark being a small country and maybe it's still quite rural, maybe it's quite rugged and whatnot, obviously colder winters certainly used to be, does that come through in the business world or the startup world, that sense of gung-ho-ness, like we can do it because we used to be Vikings and all the rest of it, which does come through still in the New Zealand business world?
Well, I think you can definitely find like areas where the people are similar to the people who talk about New Zealand, because like if you go to Jutland, for example, there's a bunch of farms and there are definitely those communities. But one thing also to keep in mind with New Zealand and Denmark is Denmark has been developed for 10,000 years. People have been living here. So it's built in a very different way, which means, for example, and also Denmark is like a tiny country. So we have it's not really a big city compared to a lot of other countries because of the population. But if you live in like the capital region where I live, it's definitely much closer to something like Germany, and imagine like the cities around Berlin than what it would be in New Zealand.
Right.
A lot of people go to capital, work, stuff like that.
So what you're saying, so that's an interesting point, Mike, isn't it? Because what Mars is actually saying is that it's not really similar to New Zealand, even though they are both two smaller countries. The degree or the time period of civilization, which I hadn't thought about, but obviously that's a European thing. So can I put that question to you, Mike? Do you think that obviously Texas has a reputation of like cowboys and tough people and ranching and do you feel that comes through in the business or the startup, or do you feel that urbanization has maybe softened it around the edges, maybe even though it hasn't been a developed country for nearly as long as Europe? Do you feel that there's still that ruggedness in the approach to startups, or do you feel it's got a bit more civilized and softer around the edges now?
It's really an interesting factor that we look at whenever we're talking to somebody about a startup. The people who, men and women, whatever color, age, all that really doesn't make any difference. What matters is, does the person have the focus on the business, but also can they demonstrate what you might refer to as a combination of the Texas toughness, that is resiliency. It's not really toughness, it's resiliency. The old saying, if you fall down 10 times, you get up 11 times. But that combined with, are they genuinely going to take care of people? Are they going to take care of their employees? Well, of course, demanding that people work hard and do their best, obviously, but are they going to take care of people? Are they going to take care of customers? Are they going to take care of clients and suppliers and all that? So the combination, which I saw really strong out of the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, for those of you listening that don't know or call themselves Kiwis. New Zealanders tend to be very friendly people, and as do some of the Danes. And that combination of being willing to work hard, being willing to know how to do multiple different kinds of things, and also, taking care of people, all of that at the same time is really what will set anybody apart when they're starting up a business.
Absolutely.
But I want to know from Moz if he has any Vikings in his history. Does he have a Viking sword or Viking shield? Come on, yeah, cool.
Nah, I like to kind of you know, that roughness you spoke about. I personally like to, when it gets cold, stuff like that. Oh, it's not that cold because Vikings. But I don't know. I probably do have Vikings in my family, but the Vikings everywhere. Like Normandy is like Viking territory.
Yeah.
The British royal
Yeah.
family is apparently half Viking, and there's Vikings everywhere.
Well, they landed in North America
We
a
conquered
long time
everything.
ago.
We fucked with everybody. It was good times. Good times.
Good time.
You could get all the beer you want. You could have some fun mushrooms, and you could just plunder the people.
I've
They just couldn't do anything.
I've never thought about Vikings and mushrooms. That would certainly explain a lot of things.
They did a lot of mushrooms, the Vikings. They loved their mushrooms just getting fucked in the forest.
Jeez.
There's like, this is not, sorry for cutting off here, James, but there's a certain thing that was supposed to be said about, like, used to be told about the Vikings. And it's probably not true because it's said that they used to eat parts of the second deadliest mushroom in Denmark. You definitely shouldn't do that. Well, fuck it, the Vikings, they might have. If somebody could survive, it would be them.
Can I just relate a Viking mushroom story?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Cut some mushrooms. Jesus.
Which and now it isn't my story, my own personal story, but I was listening to a short episode from a Joe Rogan podcast, and he had this dude on, and he was some mushroom expert, right? And he was probably in his 60s now, and he was telling a story about in the 70s. There was this family of mushrooms called the Amarita, and the most famous one is the fly agaric, which is that classic red mushroom with the wide top with the
that was the ones the Vikings supposedly ate.
Exactly, and that's apparently what a reindeer eat as well. So it is woven within the myths and the legends of all the early reindeer herders and the Vikings, right? And there is a relative of that called the Panther Cat, which is just a white version. Now, it is considered fatal, right? But what he says is it isn't fatal, but it just gives like this. So he has gone through and taken these and dried them and fried them up as omelets, or whatever, and was experimenting with them. And he said there was one time in the 70s he was in the woods because he used to be a lumberjack. A friend came over, and he had these freeze-dried panther caps, and he said, "Hey, do you want to try them? Like, there's no record, I don't know what is going to happen." They had already tried the Amaritas, and he said, yeah, sure. So they fried them up, and there was this campground sort of right next to them, and they went around, and it started kicking in after about half an hour, and there was one part of it where he just kept dropping his, I think it was a Walkman or something. It wasn't a phone, but he kept dropping something. He would pick it up and drop it, and pick it up and drop it, and pick it up and then drop it. And he said that was actually a side effect. And there's a word for that behavior, of that repeated behavior, right? And so what he said, and just to finish this story, which connects it to the Vikings, is there's the word berserk. Now, apparently there was a Viking tribe called the Berserkians or something, or the Berserkers.
Can I jump in with a bit? From what I understand from the Danish and where it goes back, is there were certain, like in the start, there were certain Vikings that would, I don't know what they did. They probably ate a bunch of fucking mushrooms, and they were very big guys wielding big ass axes, and they were called berserkers.
That's it.
And imagine having a big ass Viking running towards you with an axe, basically non-clothed, just something covering his private parts.
That's it, exactly. And you've almost told my story there, because what he found out afterwards was where the word berserk comes from is that mushroom he found out because he heard a couple of other stories, and he heard one story about this Hell's Angel who ate them, and he kept jumping off a bridge. It was like a 2 or 3 meter fall onto rocks, and he read this report in a paper or something that he kept jumping off, coming back up, jumping off, and he was covered in blood. And so what he found out about the berserkers was before a battle, they would take these Panther Cats, right? And so they never gave up. So however injured basically or whatever happened, they always overcame their enemies because it was that repeated behavior of just going forward and maybe being attacked and sort of injured, but like getting up and going forward. So you're absolutely right. There is a big, long history of the Vikings and how they actually used there is the medicinal aspect of mushrooms, but there's also the using it for fighting. So yeah, I don't know. There we go.
Yeah, I think one lesson in a way is like the Vikings were just very tactical about how they fought wars. They weren't all berserkers just running around like madmen. It was actually very tactical, and they used a lot of terror tactics, doing a bunch of crazy shit, because they knew if they could scare the other half of the army enough, it would be much easier. They only would have to kill half of them. So work smart instead of hard. Probably don't do the things the Vikings did. Don't eat those mushrooms. They apparently are deadly, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
And you can go out and try and be a berserker, see how that goes in the modern world. Just don't do it in Denmark. I don't want to be anywhere near you.
I think though, and I see that our time's coming towards the end, but maybe that's a good point to wrap it up, because I think that's a very, very, I think today's talk we've covered about resilience and how the berserkers example there is however many times that you get pushed over, get set back, fail, hypothetically, that it's the ability to continue, but also in a tactical way, because isn't there that there's that saying that the sign of madness is just to continue doing the same thing with the same result, right? So I think it's the ability to continue, but be resilient to get up with a new tactic and to try that in the startup scene.
Just one thing I want to leave your audience with before we end off here, and it's kind of tailored into what James is saying about working tactically. And I think from the people I work with, talk with, I find that a lot of people, they're using a lot of time executing, which is great, but you forget the tactical part of just sitting down and having a chat with somebody about the problem, or just sitting down and writing down ideas, finding solutions, instead of just push. Take some steps back, sit back, and actually analyze the situation and make a strategy.
Yeah, Moss, that's exactly right. And man, I know we're both excited to see what you're going to do in the future. You have a plug for the podcast? What's coming up? Who's your next couple guests? You got a plug, don't you? Here it comes.
Yeah, I used the plug. You kind of plugged this already. For the podcast, we have our next podcast is going to be a little bit of a special. Actually, we have one coming out. Well, it's the day when we're recording this. We have me and Linda had one out. Just a good chat. And our next one is kind of a special one. We have a marketing sales expert on that I've known for a long time called Brandon C. And we're just going to be talking about sales objection handling, stuff like that. And then I think the biggest plug would be to go and follow me and Linda, because we have an absolutely amazing course. She's going to be doing her own thing very soon, and we're going to we're just in the process of planning the launch, because there's a lot of other things going on right now. So I would say look out for that. You can find the link for the website down below, and learn further from that. Contact us through email, stuff like that.
All right.
That's all the plugging I have.
Thanks for the plug, and we'll see all you guys next week.